My son sold my late husband's diamond wedding ring to fund his dream wedding. The jeweler Kaye. The handkerchief still held his aftershave. The ring was gone, but the indent in the velvet remained, a perfect circle of absence where 40 years of marriage used to rest. Has someone you raised, someone you sacrificed everything for, ever taken something precious without asking? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. If you've ever wondered how far someone would go to save the ones they love, this story will shake you to your core. What if the person stealing from you was the one person you'd die to protect? What if betrayal came wrapped in good intentions? What if fighting back meant destroying your own family? Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you never thought to protect yourself from them? Has someone you raised, someone you sacrificed everything for, ever taken something precious without asking? Do you know someone who discovered their deepest wound came from their closest love? Today we're diving into Margaret's story, a quiet nurse from Mesa, Arizona, who discovered that sometimes the people we love most are capable of hurting us in ways we never imagined. This isn't just about a stolen ring. It's about what happens when grief makes us vulnerable, when financial pressure turns family into enemies, and when a mother has to choose between justice and the child she raised. Follow along as we uncover how one phone call exposed a betrayal that reached back decades, forward into a future that might never exist, and deep into the heart of what family really means when everything else gets stripped away. The jeweler's voice was professional, polite. Mrs. Chen, I'm calling to confirm the insurance transfer on the diamond band. Serial number VT 4471. I didn't breathe. I knew that number by heart. My coffee went cold on the kitchen counter as David Kim from Southwest Gems explained the routine paperwork. Insurance transfer. New owner. Smooth transaction. The words hit like bullets through my chest because I was holding Robert's insurance papers in my other hand. The same serial number. The same ring. The ring that was supposed to be upstairs in our cedar box, wrapped in his old work handkerchief. Ma'am? Are you there? I'm here. My voice came out steady. 40 years as a nurse teaches you to stay calm when everything inside is screaming. Can you tell me when this transfer took place? Let me check. Tuesday, March 15th. The seller was very knowledgeable about the piece. Knew the mining history, the family heritage. Said it was time to let it go. March 15th. The day I'd driven to Tucson for Robert's memorial service planning. The day Daniel said he'd stay home to handle some business. The day I trusted him completely. What was the seller's name? Daniel Chen. Listed himself as the owner. Professional young man, very respectful. The kitchen floor felt unsteady under my feet. Daniel. My son. The boy who used to watch his father polish that ring every Sunday morning before church. The man who cried harder than anyone at the funeral when we buried Robert without it because I couldn't bear to put it in the ground. Mrs. Chen. Thank you for calling. I hung up. My hands shook as I climbed the stairs to our bedroom. The cedar box sat where it always had, on Robert's side of the dresser, next to his reading glasses and the stack of firefighter magazines he never got to finish. I lifted the lid. The handkerchief still held his aftershave. The ring was gone, but the indent in the velvet remained, a perfect circle of absence where 40 years of marriage used to rest. If family betrayal feels impossible to face, you're not alone. Subscribe. Some fights require strategy, not screams. I sat on the bed and opened the insurance folder. Every document was there. Every appraisal. Every photograph. The serial number verification. The estate protection clause that Robert's union attorney had insisted we include after his father died. The clause that made this ring legally protected property, requiring executor consent for any transfer. Robert had protected this ring even in death. And our son had stolen it anyway. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Daniel's contact. My finger hovered over the call button. Then I set the phone down and reached for a notebook instead. If Daniel wanted to play games with legal documents, I'd play. But I'd play better. The insurance papers told me everything I needed to know about the ring's value, its protections, and its current status. But they also told me something else, something that made my blood run cold. The transfer date was wrong. March 15th was a Sunday. Southwest Gems was closed on Sundays. Which meant either the jeweler was lying or someone had backdated the paperwork. Either way, my son wasn't just a thief. He was a careful one. Write down that serial number, VT4471. You'll see why it matters. I hung up and opened the cedar box. Empty. But Robert's insurance papers were still there, and they told a different story about ownership. The handkerchief still held his aftershave. The ring was gone, but the indent in the velvet remained, a perfect circle of absence. I pressed the fabric to my face and let myself feel it for exactly 30 seconds. Robert's scent. His presence. The ghost of metal that should have been there. Then I folded the handkerchief, placed it back in the box, and got to work. Daniel's room hadn't changed since high school. Baseball trophies on the shelf. Phoenix Suns poster on the wall. But the desk was different now, covered in papers, bills, and printouts that made my stomach drop. Rejected loan applications. 3 of them. Each one stamped with red ink, denied. Insufficient income. Debt-to-income ratio exceeded. I picked up the first one. $25,000 personal loan. Reason, wedding expenses. Denied February 10th. The second one. $40,000 home equity line. Reason, celebration and family needs. Denied February 22nd. The third one made my hands shake. $75,000 debt consolidation. Reason, emergency family obligations. Denied March 8th. 7 days before he stole the ring. Under the loan papers, I found printouts from Kelly's Instagram. Photo after photo of venue tours, dress fittings, flower arrangements. Each post tagged with amounts that made my pension look like pocket change. $8,000 for photography. $12,000 for flowers. $15,000 for a dress she'd wear for 4 hours. Financial desperation makes people do terrible things. Subscribe so you recognize the warning signs before it's too late. But it was the venue contract that broke my heart. Napa Valley Estate wedding. Deposit required, $20,000. Final payment due 30 days before event, $47,000. Daniel's signature was shaky, desperate. Kelly's was smooth, confident. At the bottom of the stack, I found a printed email that made me sit down hard on his bed. From KL Morrison, events@gmail.com to Daniel Chen Mesa@gmail.com. Subject, ring update date, March 14th, 11:47 p.m. Danny. Dad's being weird about the money again. Says we need to prove we're serious about marriage, not just parties. I told him you're handling it. The ring appraisal came back at $28,000. More than enough for venue deposit. Get it done tomorrow while your mom's in Tucson. Don't feel guilty. It's just sitting there doing nothing. Uncle Robert would want us to be happy. XOXO, K. P.S. Jeweler on Central Avenue takes walk-ins until 4 p.m. Uncle Robert. She called my dead husband Uncle Robert like they were family friends. Like his memory was just another obstacle to clear for her perfect day. I read the email 3 times. Then I took a photo of it with my phone. Daniel had been planning this for weeks. The Tucson trip wasn't coincidence, it was opportunity. He'd calculated my absence, researched the jeweler, and scheduled the theft down to the hour. But Kelly had made one mistake. She'd put their crime in writing. Ever found evidence of a betrayal in your own home? Under the rejected loan papers, I found one more document that changed everything. A receipt from Desert Financial Credit Union. A safety deposit box rental, paid for 6 months in advance. Box number 247. Rented March 16th. The day after he sold the ring. Whatever Daniel had done with the money, he wasn't spending it on the wedding. He was hiding it. Which meant this wasn't just about impressing Kelly's family. This was about something else entirely. The county filing was 8 pages long. Page 3 made my hands shake. Diamond wedding band, serial VT, 4471, protected asset, transfer requires executor consent. The Mesa County Courthouse basement smelled like old paper and broken air conditioning. I'd been sitting at this metal table for 2 hours, going through Robert's probate files page by page. The clerk, a kind woman named Rosa, had pulled everything related to his estate. "Mrs. Chen, you finding what you need?" "More than I expected." I held up the estate inventory. "This ring. It's listed as protected property." Rosa leaned over and squinted at the document. Her eyebrows went up. "Oh honey. That's a special classification. Means it can't be sold, transferred, or used as collateral without the executor's written consent." She pointed to my signature on the cover page. "That's you. What happens if someone sells it without consent?" "Well, that depends. If it's family, usually civil court handles it. But if there's fraud involved..." She pulled out a different folder. "Let me show you something." The folder was labeled Unauthorized Asset Transfers, Criminal Referrals. Rosa flipped to a case summary that made my stomach clench. "See this case? Son sold his mother's wedding china while she was in the hospital. Used fake power of attorney. Judge called it elder abuse through property theft. 6 months in county jail. What made it criminal instead of civil? 3 things. Deception about ownership. Forged or missing documentation. An intent to permanently deprive the rightful owner." Rosa looked at me carefully. "Mrs. Chen, has someone sold something that belongs to your husband's estate? How many people know their rights when grief makes them vulnerable?" I showed her the insurance paperwork. Rosa's expression changed from helpful to serious. "This is a problem. According to this, the sale happened without proper estate documentation. And look here," she pointed to a stamp on the jeweler's form. "This certification stamp? It's supposed to verify ownership. But there's no probate court authorization attached." "What does that mean?" "It means whoever bought that ring might not legally own it. And whoever sold it might have committed fraud." Rosa made copies of everything. The estate inventory. The protection clause. The ownership requirements. As the machine hummed and clicked, she kept shaking her head. "Mrs. Chen, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've seen families destroy each other over money, property, you name it. But this..." She handed me the copies. "This is different. Someone who knew estate law well enough to fake the paperwork but not well enough to avoid the serial number trail. Someone smart but not smart enough." "Exactly. And that makes it traceable." The elevator ride back to the parking garage felt like floating. I had proof. Legal standing. Rights that Daniel couldn't just wish away or charm around. But I also had something else, a sick feeling in my stomach that this was about to get much worse before it got better. Because if Daniel had forged estate documents, he wasn't just stealing from me. He was committing a felony. The clerk leaned closer. "Ma'am, if someone sold this without your consent, that's not just family drama. That's a felony." Rosa walked me to the elevator. "Mrs. Chen, whatever you decide to do, move fast. If that ring gets sold again or moved out of state, recovery becomes 10 times harder." "How fast?" "Days, not weeks." The elevator doors closed, and I stared at my reflection in the polished metal. A 68-year-old widow holding papers that could send her only child to jail. The mother who'd raised him to do right, now facing the choice between justice and family. But as the elevator descended, one thought kept echoing in my mind. Robert had protected this ring even in death, trusting me to honor that protection. And I would not let him down. Harold Garcia read the documents without speaking. His finger stopped at the serial number. Margaret, we can get it back. The drive to Tucson had taken 90 minutes, but it felt like seconds now that I was sitting in Harold's office. He'd been Robert's union attorney for 12 years, handling everything from workers' compensation to estate planning. If anyone knew how to fight this legally, it was Harold. Tell me exactly what happened. Harold's voice was calm, professional. The same tone he'd used when Robert got hurt on the job and the city tried to deny his claim. I walked him through everything. The phone call. The empty box. The probate discovery. The forged paperwork. Harold took notes in neat handwriting, stopping me occasionally to ask for dates, times, specific wording. Daniel knew about the estate protections? Robert explained them to both of us when he updated his will. Daniel was there for the signing. So this wasn't ignorance. This was intentional. The words hit like a slap. Intentional. My son had intentionally stolen from his dead father's estate, knowing it was protected, knowing it was wrong, knowing it would devastate me. Harold pulled out a legal pad and drew a simple timeline. Here's what we know. March 15th, rings sold without authorization. March 16th, Daniel rents a safety deposit box. Question is, what's he hiding in that box? You think there's more? Margaret, a $28,000 ring doesn't require a safety deposit box unless there are other valuables involved. Or other secrets. Knowledge is power when someone tries to erase you. Subscribe, you'll need every advantage. Harold leaned back in his chair. I can file an emergency motion to freeze the ring's transfer and require its return. But Margaret, you need to understand what this means for Daniel. Tell me. If we prove intentional fraud, the district attorney might file criminal charges. Even if you don't want to press charges, the state can prosecute independently. Daniel could face felony theft, fraud, and elder abuse charges. Elder abuse. The words made me feel ancient and foolish. Harold, I just want the ring back. I know. But the law doesn't care what you want once we file official documents. It cares about what happened and whether crimes were committed. Harold's expression softened. There's another option. Civil recovery. Quieter. No criminal exposure for Daniel. But it takes longer and gives him time to hide assets or flee. He wouldn't flee. Margaret, a week ago you would have said he wouldn't steal. The silence stretched between us. Outside Harold's window, traffic moved steadily down Oracle Road. Normal people living normal lives where sons didn't rob their dead fathers and mothers didn't have to choose between justice and family. What do you recommend? Harold pulled out a pre-written motion. Emergency asset freeze. Filed today, heard tomorrow. It locks down the ring and any related transactions until we can sort this out properly. Clean, fast, reversible if we're wrong. And if we're right? Then we move to phase 2. Harold made one call while I sat there. 5 minutes of legal language, case numbers, and filing deadlines. When he hung up, his expression was grim. Margaret, the ring's been moved. What do you mean moved? Southwest Gems sold it this morning. Cash transaction. No paper trail beyond the initial sale record. Trust a professional or handle it alone? What's your move? Harold made one call. 5 minutes later, found it. It's still in Phoenix. And Margaret, it's not just about the ring anymore. My heart hammered against my ribs. Where is it? That's the interesting part. It wasn't sold to a customer. It was sold to another jeweler. Someone who specializes in estate jewelry and high-end consignment. Why would Daniel do that? Harold's finger tapped against his legal pad. Because he's not done stealing, Margaret. He's just getting started. The ledger entry was meticulous. Seller, Daniel Chen. Relationship to owner, unknown. Authentication, incomplete. David Kim spread the paperwork across his glass counter like evidence at a trial. The fluorescent lights made everything look harsh, clinical. I could smell the metal polish and leather from the watch repair station in the back. Mrs. Chen, I've been in this business 30 years. When someone brings in a piece this significant. He tapped the serial number with his pen. I asked questions. The transaction record showed Daniel's signature, shaky and rushed. The date made my stomach turn, 3 days after Robert's memorial service. While I was still picking up casserole dishes from neighbors, my son was here, selling his father's legacy. What kind of questions? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. David pulled out a second folder, thicker than the first. Your son couldn't provide proper documentation. No death certificate, no estate papers, no insurance records. Just the ring and a story about needing quick cash. I studied the photos David had taken, close-ups of the band, the inscription inside that read, RC, 1943. Robert's father's initials and the year he'd bought it with his mining wages. 3 generations of Chen men had worn this ring. Now it was inventory. I gave him 3,000, David continued. Market value is closer to 8, but without proper papers. He shrugged. I protect myself. 3,000. Daniel's wedding venue wanted 47,000 as a deposit. This was desperation, not solution. Mr. Kim, I have all the documentation. Estate papers, insurance records, everything. I placed Harold's folder on the counter. What would it take to reverse this transaction? David's eyebrows lifted as he scanned the probate documents. This is comprehensive. Your attorney did thorough work. He looked up at me. Mrs. Chen, if you can prove ownership, I'm required to return the item. State law. My heart jumped, but I kept my face calm. And the money? Your son would need to return what I paid him. With interest. I thought about those maxed-out credit cards, the rejected loan applications. Daniel didn't have $3,000 anymore. He'd spent it on wedding deposits, honeymoon reservations, flowers that would die in a week. David reached under the counter and produced a manila envelope. Mrs. Chen, your son came back yesterday. He was asking about buying it back, but he couldn't meet our price. The envelope contained printed emails between Daniel and David, getting increasingly desperate. Daniel offering payment plans, promising future money, begging for extensions. The last email was from this morning. Please Mr. Kim, the wedding is next week. I'll get you the money somehow. He's getting married next week? I asked. David nodded. He mentioned it. Seemed like the ring money was just the beginning of his expenses. I stared at the transaction record again. $3,000. A drop in the bucket for what Daniel needed, but he'd grabbed it anyway. Like a drowning man clutching driftwood, knowing it wouldn't save him but unable to let go. Mr. Kim, I'll take my ring back now. He hesitated. Mrs. Chen, I need to notify the seller about the ownership challenge. State law requires. No. I met his eyes. Not yet. Give me 2 days. David pulled out a second folder. Mrs. Chen, your son came back yesterday. He was asking about buying it back, but he couldn't meet our price. Ever caught someone in a lie they thought was buried? The venue invoice was in Daniel's mailbox. Napa Valley Estate wedding, final payment due, $47,000. The ring money was gone. I sat in my car outside Daniel's apartment complex, staring at the bill I'd pulled from his overflowing mailbox. The paper felt expensive, cream-colored with gold lettering. The kind of invoice that screamed prestige and demanded payment in full. The numbers made my chest tight. Venue, $22,000. Catering, $18,000. Photography, $7,000. Daniel's teaching salary was $45,000 a year. Before taxes. My phone buzzed with Instagram notifications. Kelly had tagged me in her wedding countdown posts, so they flooded my feed whether I wanted them or not. I scrolled through her story highlights: dream venue, perfect dress, family traditions. Her dress cost more than my monthly pension. The flowers, just the flowers, cost more than Daniel's monthly rent. Each photo showed her with different family members, all of them polished and pressed like they'd stepped out of magazines. Her mother's comment on the venue post made my stomach drop. Kelly deserves the best. So glad Daniel's family could contribute to making this dream possible. Daniel's family. Me. They thought I was funding this circus. I found more papers scattered in his mailbox, credit card statements with balances that made me dizzy. Visa, maxed. MasterCard, over limit. American Express, payment past due. A second mortgage application on his condo, marked denied, in red stamps. This wasn't a wedding. This was financial suicide with flowers. A handwritten note fell from the invoice as I sorted through everything. Dan, Dad's ring better be worth it. This is our only shot at impressing my family. Kelly. I read it twice. Dad's ring. She knew exactly where the money came from. This wasn't Daniel's desperate secret, this was their plan. My hands shook as I photographed everything with my phone. Harold would need documentation. Linda Morrison would need proof. The family court would need evidence that this wasn't just grief spending or poor judgment. This was calculated theft with a wedding dress as camouflage. Kelly's latest Instagram post showed her at a spa, getting pre-wedding treatments. The caption read, "Blessed to marry into such a generous family. Robert would be so proud to see his sacrifice making our dreams come true. Hashtag forever grateful, hashtag family first. Robert's sacrifice." They'd turned my husband's death into their wedding theme. I screenshot everything, the posts, the comments, the timeline. The ring disappeared the week after Robert's memorial. Kelly's first venue payment went through 4 days later. The timeline wasn't coincidence. Kelly's father had commented on that post, "Young love requires investment. Proud to welcome Daniel into our family tradition of success." Family tradition of success. I understood now. This wasn't about Daniel proving himself worthy. This was about Kelly proving she could marry up, even if she had to steal the ladder herself. The venue's final notice was paper-clipped to a honeymoon itinerary. Bora Bora, overwater bungalows, 5-star everything. Another $15,000 Daniel didn't have. I started my car. Harold needed to see this tonight. Pressure to impress can destroy families. Subscribe so you spot the toxic patterns early. Whose wedding was this really for? Linda Morrison didn't mince words. Your son committed theft. The question is whether you want justice or just want your ring back. Her Scottsdale office overlooked Camelback Mountain through floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything was glass and steel and expensive art that probably cost more than Daniel's yearly salary. Linda herself looked like she belonged here, sharp suit, graying hair pulled back, eyes that had seen every family tragedy money could buy. She spread my documents across her conference table like a prosecutor building a case. Probate papers, insurance records, jeweler receipts, bank statements. My son's financial collapse laid out in black and white. Estate theft in Arizona carries felony charges, she said, not looking at me. Especially when the value exceeds $5,000. Your ring's appraised value puts this in serious territory. I watched her sort through Kelly's Instagram screenshots. The spa photos, the wedding planning posts, the comments about Robert's sacrifice. Linda's expression didn't change, but she lingered on each image. Your daughter-in-law knew, she said finally. This wasn't just Daniel's decision. The words hung in the air between us. Conspiracy. 2 people planning to steal from a grieving widow, then throw a party with the proceeds. Linda, what are my options? She leaned back in her leather chair. Criminal charges guarantee justice but destroy your family. Civil recovery gets your ring back but lets them walk away clean. She paused. There's a third option. I waited. Restraining order on the ring, effective immediately. Freezes any further sale or transfer. Gives us leverage to negotiate terms that protect you and give Daniel a chance to make this right. What kind of terms? Linda pulled out a legal pad and started writing. Full restitution to you. Public acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Mandatory financial counseling for Daniel. Community service instead of jail time. I thought about Daniel's face when he confessed about Robert's debts, the way his voice broke when he talked about protecting me from Tony Reeves. Stupid and wrong, but not evil. And if he refuses? Then we file criminal charges and let the state handle it. Linda's pen stopped moving. Margaret, I need you to understand something. Once we start this process, there's no going back to Sunday dinners and Christmas presents. Legal action changes families forever. I looked out at Camelback Mountain, remembering all the times Robert and I had hiked those trails. He'd bought the ring with honest money, earned through dangerous work in mines that coughed dust into his lungs for 30 years. Daniel was throwing that legacy away for one day of pretending to be something he wasn't. File the restraining order. Linda slid a paper across the desk, restraining order on the ring, effective immediately. He can't sell it again. But Margaret, this will destroy your relationship forever. She was wrong about one thing. Daniel had already destroyed our relationship when he decided my grief was his opportunity. I was just making sure he couldn't do it to anyone else. One more thing, Linda said, reaching for her phone. I need to notify all local jewelers about the restraining order. Standard procedure. She made 3 calls while I sat there. Each conversation was professional, efficient. By tomorrow morning, every pawn shop and jewelry store in Phoenix would know that ring was stolen property. Daniel's wedding was in 6 days. Kelly's family would arrive tomorrow. The honeymoon was paid for with money that wasn't his. Linda hung up her last call. Margaret, your son will know about this order by evening. Once those calls go out, word travels fast in the jewelry business. Justice or family peace, can you have both? I practiced the words in my car outside his apartment. Daniel, we need to talk about your father's ring. But when he opened the door, his face told me he already knew. His eyes were red, not from crying but from sleeplessness. The kind of exhausted that comes from staring at ceiling fans all night, calculating impossible math. He wore the same shirt as yesterday, wrinkled and coffee-stained. Mom. He stepped aside to let me in. David Kim called me an hour ago. Daniel's apartment looked like a financial hurricane had hit it. Wedding planning books stacked on every surface, vendor contracts spread across his dining table, Kelly's dress hanging in the living room like a white ghost. The coffee table was covered with credit card statements and loan applications, all marked with red stamps of rejection. I set my purse down and looked around. This is quite a mess. Kelly's family arrives tomorrow. The rehearsal dinner is Thursday. His voice was flat, defeated. Mom, I don't know what to do. I sat on his couch, moving aside a folder marked honeymoon receipts. Everything was already paid for, booked, confirmed. Canceling now would cost penalties on top of the money already spent. Let's start with the truth, I said. All of it. Daniel collapsed into his kitchen chair. I thought I could handle it. Kelly's father kept talking about family contributions, wedding traditions, showing respect through investment. He gestured at the papers around us. Her family spent $30,000 on her sister's wedding. Just the reception. So you stole from your father. The word hit him like a slap. I borrowed against inheritance. I thought you'd understand once you saw how happy Kelly was, how important this was to her family. Daniel, there is no inheritance. Your father left debts. His face went white. What? I pulled out the documents Harold had prepared, Robert's real financial situation, the gambling debts, the loan shark agreements. Daniel read them with growing horror. Mom, if you knew about Dad's debts, why didn't you tell me? I didn't know until yesterday. I watched him process this. You weren't protecting an inheritance, Daniel. You were stealing from a widow. He put his head in his hands. Kelly's going to leave me. Her father will destroy me professionally. I teach at his daughter's school district. Kelly's father respects honesty. Show him these papers. Tell him the truth about our financial situation. Give him a chance to be a decent human being. Daniel looked at me with tears in his eyes. Mom, if I don't get that ring back, Kelly's father will destroy me. And there's something else you don't know about Dad's death. The air conditioning hummed in the silence. Outside, I could hear Kelly's car pulling into the parking lot, back from her dress fitting. Tell me, I said. Family secrets have a way of destroying everything. Subscribe, you need to see how deep this goes. What family secret would change everything you thought you knew? Daniel's voice cracked. Dad didn't just have a heart attack, Mom. He had gambling debts. The ring was collateral. I felt the world tilt sideways. The apartment, the wedding chaos, even Kelly's key turning in the front door lock, everything became background noise to those 8 words. Collateral for what? Daniel pulled out a manila folder from under the wedding contracts. Inside were papers I'd never seen, loan agreements with Robert's signature, payment schedules, and a security clause that made my hands shake. Diamond wedding band, serial VT 4471, held as insurance against default. Dad came to me 6 months before he died, Daniel said. He was trying to clean up the mess before you found out. The gambling started after his retirement, when he had too much time and not enough purpose. Kelly walked in carrying coffee and saw us at the table. She read the mood immediately. I'll be in the bedroom, she said, disappearing without questions. I stared at Robert's handwriting on the loan documents. The same careful script that had written grocery lists and anniversary cards for 40 years. Except these papers were promises to pay money we didn't have. How much? I asked. $73,000. Dad had been making payments, keeping current. But the interest was killing him. Daniel's hands shook as he sorted through the documents. He had a plan to refinance through the Union Credit Union, use the ring as collateral for a better rate. But he died first. The heart attack happened at the credit union. He was there to sign the papers. Daniel's voice broke. I found these in his truck, along with a letter addressed to you. He handed me an envelope with my name in Robert's writing. Inside was a single page. Margaret, if you're reading this, I didn't get the chance to fix what I broke. The ring is safe with the union until the debt is clear. Don't blame yourself. Don't blame Danny. Some mistakes take a lifetime to undo, and I ran out of time. Love always, Robert. I read it twice. Robert knew he was dying. Not the heart attack, the shame. The weight of hiding this from me, of risking our security for the empty thrill of cards and dice and long-shot bets. Mom, when Tony Reeves came around asking for payment, I panicked. Dad's letter said the ring was safe with the union, but it wasn't. It was in your cedar box, and Tony knew it. The Loan Shark's business card was still in Dad's wallet. It had yesterday's date written on the back. Tony came by the memorial service. He was respectful, quiet. Offered condolences. But he slipped me this card and said, "Your father was a good man who made bad choices. Don't make his mistakes worse." I understood now. Daniel hadn't stolen from me, he'd tried to save me. Badly, stupidly, without asking, but the motivation was protection, not greed. Danny, why didn't you just tell me? Because Dad made me promise. His last words to me were, "Don't let this touch your mother." I thought if I could just handle it quietly, pay off Tony, you'd never have to know. Outside, Kelly was on the phone with someone, her voice rising with wedding stress. How well do you really know the people you love most? Tony Reeves wore a suit that cost more than my monthly pension. His handshake was firm, his smile was warm, and his words were ice. Your husband owed me $73,000. We met at a Starbucks near the Biltmore, neutral territory that felt safe but probably wasn't. Tony looked like any other businessman having coffee with a client. If you didn't know better, you'd think he was selling insurance or discussing investments. Mrs. Chen, thank you for agreeing to meet. He stirred his coffee methodically. I prefer to handle these matters personally, especially with families. I'd spent 2 hours preparing for this conversation with Harold on the phone, running through every possible scenario. Stay calm, gather information, don't commit to anything. But sitting across from Tony, I felt like Robert must have, small, trapped, in over my head. My son said you came to the memorial service. I did. Your husband was a good man who made bad choices. I wanted to pay my respects. Tony's voice was gentle, like a counselor. I also wanted to assess the family situation. Robert spoke about you often. The casual mention of their conversations made my skin crawl. How many times had they met? How long had Robert been living this double life, discussing our private business with this stranger? What kind of business arrangement did you have with my husband? Tony pulled out a leather portfolio and extracted several documents. Robert started small. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. Poker games with retired firefighters, weekend trips to Talking Stick Casino. It happens to a lot of men after retirement. The papers showed a progression of loans, each one larger than the last. Robert's signature got shakier as the amounts grew. The interest rates made my stomach turn, 12% monthly compounding. Mrs. Chen, your husband wasn't a criminal. He was lonely and bored and looking for excitement. But excitement costs money, and Robert's excitement cost more than his pension could cover. I forced myself to read through every document. The pattern was clear: Robert would win some, lose more, borrow to chase losses, win just enough to keep hoping. The classic spiral Harold had warned me about. The ring? I asked. Security measure. Robert suggested it himself when the debt reached 70,000. He said it was worth more than enough to cover the balance. Tony's expression didn't change. I never took possession. That wasn't our agreement. But you knew Daniel sold it. I knew the debt needed resolution. Your son made a choice to liquidate assets rather than restructure payment terms. Tony closed his portfolio. I respected his decision. I studied Tony's face. This wasn't some movie villain with gold teeth and brass knuckles. This was a businessman who'd loaned money to a desperate retiree and wanted his investment back. Clean, legal, documented. What happens now? Tony checked his watch. Mrs. Chen, your son bought you 6 weeks. The interest meter is still running. Meaning? Meaning I need $73,000 plus accumulated interest. Daniel's $3,000 was a good faith payment, but it doesn't stop the clock. Tony stood up. You have until the wedding day to arrange full payment, or we discuss alternative collection methods. He left his business card on the table. Professional, expensive cardstock with raised lettering. The kind of card that suggested legitimate business and serious consequences. Debt follows families like shadows. Subscribe. Protection starts with awareness. Would you sacrifice everything to protect your parent? Harold's plan was elegant and ruthless. We use the estate law to freeze everything: the debt, the ring, the threats. But it means Daniel faces charges. The 3 of us sat in Linda's conference room at 7 in the morning. Harold had driven up from Tucson overnight after I called him about Tony Reeves. Empty coffee cups and legal documents covered the table like a war council planning strategy. Estate protection law is clear, Linda said, pointing to highlighted sections in her Arizona legal code. Any asset transfer from a deceased person's estate requires executor approval. Margaret is the executor. Daniel had no legal authority. Harold nodded. And the gambling debts? Technically not Margaret's responsibility. Robert died intestate regarding these specific obligations. The estate can challenge the validity of unsecured debt agreements made without spousal knowledge. I listened to them discuss my life like a chess game. Move here, countermove there, protect this piece, sacrifice that one. But every strategy had the same ending: Daniel in handcuffs or bankruptcy court. What about Tony? I asked. Tony's a businessman, Harold said. He wants his money, not a legal battle. If we can demonstrate that the debt was obtained through deceptive means, hiding it from you, using estate assets as collateral without proper authority, we can negotiate a settlement. Linda pulled out a fresh legal pad. Here's what I propose. We file a protective order on all estate assets, including the ring. This freezes any current transactions and prevents new ones. We then demand full documentation of Robert's debt agreements and challenge their validity. And Daniel? Daniel cooperates fully or faces criminal charges for estate theft. Linda's pen scratched across the paper. No middle ground. He either helps us unravel this mess or becomes part of the prosecution. Harold leaned forward. Margaret, this strategy protects you legally and financially. But it burns every bridge with your son. I thought about Kelly's Instagram posts, the way she'd turned Robert's death into wedding hashtags. I thought about Daniel's face when he confessed, the genuine fear about Tony Reeves coming after me. What if Daniel refuses to cooperate? Then we have probable cause for criminal charges. Theft over $5,000, elder exploitation, fraud. Linda ticked off each charge on her fingers. Arizona prosecutors love these cases. Makes them look tough on family crime. Harold's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, and his face went grim. Margaret, the ring's been moved. It's no longer at the original jeweler. My chest tightened. Where? David Kim says someone came in yesterday afternoon with a court order claiming ownership rights. They took the ring and left this address. Harold showed me his notes. It's a jewelry store in Scottsdale. High-end place. Linda was already on her computer. That's Kelly's family's jeweler. Her mother mentioned them in an Instagram comment, family business for 3 generations. I understood. Kelly's family wasn't just funding the wedding. They were hiding the evidence. Can we get it back? With the restraining order, yes. But we'll have to serve papers on Kelly's family directly. Linda looked at me seriously. Margaret, this stops being quiet tomorrow. Everyone will know. I thought about Sunday dinners, Christmas mornings, future grandchildren I might never meet. Then I thought about Robert's calloused hands, the mine dust in his lungs, the honest work that bought that ring in 1943. File everything. Harold made the call while Linda printed documents. By noon, the restraining order would be active. By evening, Kelly's family would know their future son-in-law was a thief. Protect your child or protect yourself, why can't you do both? The wedding invitation was hand-delivered. Kelly's note was attached, Mrs. Chen, Daniel needs his family now. Please don't let legal issues ruin our day. Kelly stood at my front door in yoga clothes and designer sunglasses, holding the invitation like a peace treaty. Behind her, a black Mercedes idled in my driveway, her mother, waiting and watching. Margaret, can we talk? Kelly's voice was sweet, controlled. The same tone she used with her kindergarten students when they misbehaved. I stepped aside to let her in. She glanced around my living room with the same expression I'd used to examine a thrift store, polite interest covering obvious judgment. I know you're upset about the ring situation, she said, settling onto my couch. But Daniel was trying to protect you from those awful men your husband was involved with. I sat across from her. Those awful men? The gambling people. Daniel told me everything about Robert's problems. Kelly pulled out her phone and scrolled through what looked like notes. He said Robert had borrowed money from dangerous criminals, and the ring was the only way to keep you safe. I studied her face. Kelly believed this story completely. To her, Daniel was a hero protecting his helpless mother from loan sharks and debt collectors. The ring wasn't stolen property, it was a noble sacrifice. Kelly, did you know about the insurance documentation? The estate protections? Daniel said those were just old papers that didn't matter anymore. She leaned forward, earnest and condescending. Margaret, I know this is confusing. Legal things usually are. But my father has lawyers who can explain everything after the wedding. After the wedding. When the ring was permanently gone and the evidence was scattered across a honeymoon in Bora Bora. What did your parents say about the ring's history? Kelly's expression shifted slightly. They said it was touching that Daniel wanted to contribute something meaningful to our wedding fund. Family traditions are important to them. Family traditions. Like stealing from widows, apparently. Kelly, I need you to understand something. That ring wasn't Daniel's to sell. Legally or morally. But Margaret, Robert is gone. Daniel is your only family now. Kelly's voice got sharper. My parents are flying in from Chicago. The caterer is prepping for 200 guests. Our photographer won a national award. This isn't just a wedding, it's the beginning of our life together. I listened to her describe the celebration they built with stolen money. The ice sculpture, the string quartet, the vintage wine her father had selected. Each detail was a knife twist, another way my husband's legacy was being turned into someone else's social media moment. Kelly, the ring has to be returned. Her phone buzzed with texts. She glanced at it and her face went pale. The jeweler in Scottsdale is calling my mother. He says there's a legal hold on the ring. I said nothing. Margaret, please. My family flew in for this. The venues are booked, the flowers are ordered. If this wedding doesn't happen, my father will never forgive Daniel. Or me. She was right about one thing, this wedding was her family's investment in social standing. Kelly wasn't just marrying Daniel, she was proving to her parents that she could land a man worthy of their money. At the rehearsal dinner, Kelly's father stood to toast, to Daniel, who proved his commitment by selling his most precious possession for love. The room erupted in applause. I gripped my water glass and wondered how many people knew they were celebrating theft. Manipulation disguised as love destroys families. Subscribe to recognize it before you're trapped. Should Margaret speak up or stay silent? I stood up during the toast. Every head turned. I held the probate document in my hand and spoke 6 words. That ring was never his to sell. The Napa Valley reception hall went silent except for the string quartet, who kept playing because no one had told them to stop. 200 guests in their wedding finest turned to stare at the old woman in the navy dress who'd just destroyed the celebration. Kelly's father, microphone still in hand, blinked twice. I'm sorry, Mrs. Chen, is it? Margaret Chen. Daniel's mother. Robert's widow. I kept my voice level, conversational. The ring your son-in-law sold to fund this wedding belonged to my deceased husband's estate. It was theft. The word hung in the air like smoke. Guests started whispering, phones came out, and Kelly's mother grabbed her daughter's arm with white knuckles. Daniel stood frozen at the head table, his face the color of the tablecloth. Kelly's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Ma'am, I think there's been some misunderstanding, Kelly's father said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent decades commanding boardrooms. Daniel explained the ring's significance to our family. His contribution to. Contribution? I pulled out my phone and read from David Kim's transaction record. Seller, Daniel Chen. Relationship to owner, unknown. Authentication, incomplete. Sale date, 3 days after Robert's memorial service. The timeline hit the room like a physical blow. While I was grieving, Daniel was cashing in. While we were burying Robert, Daniel was turning his legacy into wedding money. Kelly's father set down the microphone and stepped off the platform. The man was used to controlling situations, and this was spinning beyond his reach. Mrs. Chen, what exactly are you saying about my new son-in-law? I opened Linda's folder and pulled out the restraining order. I'm saying the state of Arizona has frozen all transactions involving serial number VT 4471. I'm saying Daniel sold stolen property. And I'm saying this wedding was funded with money that belonged to a dead man's estate. The guests were no longer pretending to ignore us. Phones were recording, people were standing for better views, and the string quartet finally stopped playing. Kelly found her voice. Daniel, Tell them this isn't true. Tell them about the gambling debts, the protection, the... Kelly, stop. Daniel's voice was barely audible. Mom's right. I sold Dad's ring without permission. Everything she's saying is true. The confession hit the room like an explosion. Kelly's mother made a sound like a wounded animal. Her father's face went through several shades of red before settling on something that looked like cold calculation. Security, Kelly's father called, and 2 men in suits started moving toward me. But Kelly's father raised his hand. Wait. Mrs. Chen, what exactly are you saying about my new son-in-law? I looked around the room. At the flowers that cost more than most people's cars, at the guests who dressed up to celebrate theft, at Kelly and her $15,000 dress bought with my husband's memory. I'm saying I want my ring back. And I want everyone here to know how you got the money to pay for their dinner. Kelly burst into tears. Her father stepped closer, his businessman's mask finally slipping. Mrs. Chen, you've just ruined my daughter's wedding day. I hope you're satisfied. Ever had to choose between keeping peace and speaking truth? Kelly's father wrote the check himself. $47,000 to retrieve stolen property, he said. Consider it a wedding gift, to integrity. The reception hall had emptied except for family and the cleanup crew. Centerpieces sat abandoned on tables where guests had been enjoying stolen generosity an hour earlier. Kelly sat in her wedding dress crying into cloth napkins while her mother rubbed her back and shot murderous looks at everyone else. William Patterson, Kelly's father, had taken control of the situation with the efficiency of a man who'd built 3 companies from nothing. After my public revelation, he'd spent 20 minutes on phone calls, consulting with lawyers, accountants, and what sounded like a private investigator. Mrs. Chen, I owe you an apology, he said, tearing the check from his personal checkbook. When Daniel told us about his family contribution, I assumed it was legitimate. Daniel stood against the wall like a defendant awaiting sentencing. His tuxedo was rumpled, his boutonniere had fallen off, and his face looked like he'd aged 5 years in 5 hours. Mr. Patterson, your daughter knew where the money came from, I said quietly. William's eyes shifted to Kelly, who was still sobbing into napkins. Kelly? Daddy, I thought it was okay. Daniel said his father wanted him to have the ring, that it was family tradition to pass it down for weddings. Kelly's voice was thick with tears and desperation. I didn't know about the estate stuff or the legal problems. I pulled out my phone and showed William the screenshots of Kelly's Instagram posts, the ones about Robert's sacrifice and family investment. He read them twice, his jaw tightening with each word. Kelly Elizabeth Patterson. His voice was ice. Did you or did you not know that ring was taken without permission? Kelly looked at Daniel, then at her mother, then back at her father. I knew Margaret didn't give it to him. But he said she was too emotional about it, that she'd understand later. The truth was like watching dominoes fall. Kelly's mother covered her face with her hands. The wedding planner, still hovering nearby, started quietly packing up centerpieces. William walked over to Daniel. Son, you lied to my face about where this money came from. You involved my daughter in theft. You've embarrassed our family in front of 200 people. Mr. Patterson, I can explain. No. William's voice cut through Daniel's stammering. You can pack your things. This marriage is over. Kelly's sobs got louder. Daddy, you can't. I love him. You love what you thought he was. This man is a thief and a liar. William turned back to me. Mrs. Chen, where's your ring now? I pulled out the jewelry box Linda had retrieved from the Scottsdale store. Inside, Robert's ring sat in its original velvet setting, exactly where it belonged. The afternoon light through the reception hall windows made the diamond catch fire. Daniel approached with the ring box. Mom, Dad would be proud of how you fought. But there's one more thing about his debts you need to know. What now, Daniel? Dad wasn't just gambling. He was trying to win back money he'd already lost, money from his pension fund. Money that was supposed to take care of you. Daniel's voice broke completely. The gambling debts were real, but they started because he'd borrowed against your retirement first. The reception hall spun around me. Robert hadn't just hidden gambling addiction. He'd stolen our future and then gambled it away trying to fix his first theft. Kelly's father was watching my face. Mrs. Chen, how much of your retirement is gone? When respect is earned through truth, everyone wins. Agree? The addiction counselor's receipt was in Robert's wallet. He'd been getting help. The gambling wasn't the whole truth. I found the receipt when Daniel finally brought me Robert's personal effects, the ones he'd been protecting me from for 3 months. Tucked behind Robert's firefighter union card was a small slip of paper, Gamblers Anonymous meeting attendance, session 12 of 20. Payment received, $75. Robert had been in recovery. For 3 months before he died, he'd been driving to Tucson every Tuesday night, sitting in church basements with other men who'd lost control of their luck and their lives. Mom, I found this in Dad's truck the day after he died, Daniel said, handing me a manila envelope. I thought it would just make everything worse. Inside were journals, pages and pages of Robert's handwriting documenting every bet, every loss, every moment of shame. But also recovery worksheets, sponsor phone numbers, and a payment plan he'd negotiated with Tony Reeves. Day 47, told sponsor about the ring. He says using it as collateral was wrong, even if Margaret never knew. Need to find another way. Day 52, Margaret deserves better than a husband who steals from her future. Union Credit Union approved debt consolidation. Ring stays with family. Day 58, heart racing again. Doctor says stress. Can't tell Margaret why. 3 more weeks until debt is clear. Robert hadn't died running from his debts. He died trying to fix them. Daniel, why didn't you show me these? Because I thought you'd hate him. I thought it was better if you remembered Dad as perfect instead of. Daniel gestured at the journals. Instead of this. I read through Robert's recovery plan. He'd been 3 weeks away from clearing the debt without touching our retirement, without involving Tony Reeves, without sacrificing the ring. The heart attack at the credit union wasn't coincidence, it was stress from carrying secrets he thought would destroy me. Your father was getting help, I said finally. He was fixing his mistakes. But he died before he could finish. I looked at the ring on my finger, then at Daniel's tear-stained face. No, honey. He finished the most important part. He stopped gambling. He got honest about the damage. He protected our future. Daniel had been trying to complete Robert's mission, just with the wrong information and worse judgment. The theft was wrong, but the motivation was love, clumsy, panicked, misguided love. What happens now? Daniel asked. I thought about Kelly, probably still crying in her wedding dress. About William Patterson's check clearing my account. About Tony Reeves, who'd already agreed to Harold's settlement offer once he saw Robert's recovery documentation. Now you learn the difference between protecting someone and lying to them. I slipped the ring onto my finger for the first time. It fit perfectly, just like the truth finally did. And the wedding? That's between you and Kelly. But son, any marriage that starts with theft and lies has already failed. Save yourself the honeymoon expenses. Daniel nodded, understanding finally reaching his eyes. Truth doesn't always destroy families, sometimes it saves them. Subscribe for more stories where courage and love find a way. What family legacy would you fight to protect? Share your story below. Drop the one truth that changed your family forever.